In the autumn of 1347, ships arrived at the Sicilian port of Messina from the Black Sea. To the people waiting on the docks, they looked like ordinary merchant vessels returning with goods, sailors, and stories from distant lands. But when the ships came closer, horror stepped onto the shore. Many sailors were already dead. Others were barely alive, feverish, weak, and covered with painful swellings. The people of Messina did not know it yet, but something invisible had crossed the sea with those ships. It was not an army. It was not a king. It was not a storm. It was a disease that would move faster than fear, spread through trade routes, enter homes, churches, castles, and villages, and leave entire communities silent. The Black Death had reached Europe, and from that moment, the continent would never be the same again. At first, no one understood what was happening. People saw fever. They saw weakness. They saw blackened skin, painful swellings, and sudden death. But they did not understand bacteria, fleas, rats, or infection. To medieval minds, the plague felt like punishment, poison, bad air, or a curse moving through the world. Doctors tried what they knew. Priests prayed. Families locked doors. Merchants fled from infected towns, unknowingly carrying danger with them. The disease did not need permission to enter a city. It moved through crowded streets, dirty homes, grain stores, ports, markets, and trade roads. The world of medieval Europe was connected by commerce, travel, and war. Those same connections now became pathways of death. A man could feel healthy in the morning and be dying days later. A family could sit together at supper and be gone before the week ended. The enemy was everywhere because it could not be seen. And that made it more terrifying than any army. Soon, fear became the true language of Europe. In city after city, bells rang for the dead until no one could count the tolls. Streets emptied, shops closed. Markets that once shouted with life became silent. Neighbors avoided neighbors. Friends feared friends. Even family members sometimes abandoned one another, terrified that love itself might bring death closer. The plague did not only attack bodies, it attacked trust. When a house showed signs of sickness, people whispered and moved away. When a cart carried bodies through the street, windows closed. When a cough echoed in a room, everyone looked at the sick person as if death had already entered. Some cities tried quarantines. Some blocked travelers. Some burned herbs in the air. Some blamed strangers, outsiders, or the innocent. But the plague continued. It did not care about city walls, noble blood, wealth, prayer, or fear. Europe was beginning to understand that this disaster was not temporary. It was a world being broken. Medieval doctors tried to fight the plague with the knowledge they had, but the enemy was beyond their understanding. Some believed the disease came from poisoned air. Others blamed the movement of planets, corrupted blood, or divine anger. Treatments included herbs, bleeding, smoke, vinegar, and desperate rituals, but none of it could stop the wave. The famous plague doctor mask with the long beak became more common in later plague periods, but the image still represents the helpless fear of a world trying to protect itself from invisible death. In the 14th century, medicine stood almost powerless. Doctors entered homes where entire families were burning with fever. They touched the sick, examined swellings, and spoke words of comfort they themselves did not fully believe. Many doctors died. Many priests died. Many caregivers died because compassion placed them closest to danger. The tragedy was not that people did nothing. The tragedy was that they did not know what would work. And in that ignorance, the plague ruled. The Black Death did not only strike great cities. It reached small villages hidden in valleys, farms, forests, and mountain roads. In some places, the disease arrived with a traveler, a merchant, a priest, or a returning family member. At first, only one person fell ill, then another, then an entire household. Soon, fields were left untended, animals wandered without owners, and churchyards filled faster than graves could be dug. Some villages lost so many people that they never truly recovered. Imagine a place where every voice is familiar. A village where everyone knows every birth, wedding, argument, and harvest. Then imagine silence replacing that life in a matter of weeks. Doors remained shut. Fires went cold. Tools lay abandoned. The dead outnumbered the living. The plague turned ordinary villages into ghostly memories. And across Europe, countless small communities learned that disaster did not need a palace or a battlefield to change history. It could end the world one village at a time. When people cannot explain suffering, they search for meaning. During the Black Death, many turned to faith with desperate intensity. Churches filled with prayers. Processions moved through streets. Some believed Europe was being punished for sin. Others joined extreme movements, trying to earn mercy through pain and public repentance. But fear also created cruelty. In several regions, innocent communities were blamed for the plague. Rumors spread faster than truth. Some accused outsiders, travelers, beggars, or minority groups of poisoning wells or bringing disease. These accusations led to violence and persecution, adding human cruelty to natural disaster. The plague revealed both sides of humanity. Some people cared for the sick at great risk to themselves. Others abandoned, accused, or attacked those who were vulnerable. In a world collapsing under death, fear became dangerous. Because when people cannot fight the true enemy, they sometimes create false ones. And history remembers that too. When millions died, Europe's entire social order began to shake. Fields needed workers. Lords needed peasants. Towns needed craftsmen. But labor had become scarce. Those who survived suddenly discovered that their work was more valuable than before. For centuries, many peasants had lived under heavy obligations. After the plague, some demanded better wages, better conditions, and greater freedom. Landowners resisted, rulers tried to control wages, and tensions grew between the old world and the new reality. The Black Death was not only a medical disaster, it was an economic earthquake. The dead left gaps everywhere, in farms, workshops, monasteries, armies, and families. The living had to rebuild with fewer hands and different expectations. A peasant who had once been easily replaced was now needed. A worker who had once been powerless could now bargain. The plague destroyed millions of lives, but it also weakened old systems that had seemed permanent. Europe did not return to what it had been. The numbers are almost impossible to imagine. About 25 million people are estimated to have died in Europe between 1347 and 1351. Some regions lost a third or even more of their population. Families vanished. Monasteries emptied. Town councils collapsed. Entire generations were scarred. But the survivors carried a different burden. They had to live in a world full of absences. A father's chair remained empty. A mother's voice was gone. Children grew up without siblings. Fields were inherited by people who never expected to own them. Houses were filled with memories too painful to touch. Survival was not simple victory. Many lived with guilt, grief, fear, and confusion. They had watched the world break and somehow remained. The Black Death did not end when the dying slowed. It continued in the minds of those who remembered. Europe survived, but it survived wounded. After the plague, Europe slowly began to change. The Old World had not disappeared overnight, but it had been deeply shaken. Labor became more valuable. Religious authority was questioned by some. Art grew darker and more focused on death. Governments learned the importance of public order during disease. Communities rebuilt, but not in the same shape. The Black Death forced people to confront how fragile life was. It changed how they thought about work, wealth, faith, death, and power. In some places, survivors inherited land. In others, rebellion grew, from attempts to force workers back into old conditions. History does not move in one straight line, but the plague became one of the great turning points of the medieval world. Out of unimaginable loss came social pressure, economic change, and a new awareness that the structures of life could collapse. Europe had not escaped death. It had been transformed by it. The Black Death ended as a great wave, but plague did not vanish forever. Outbreaks returned again and again in later centuries, reminding Europe that the danger had not truly disappeared. The disease became part of memory, art, religion, law, and fear. Today, science understands what medieval Europe could not. Plague is caused by Yersinia pestis, and modern antibiotics can treat it if given quickly. But in the 14th century, people faced it almost blind. That is why the story still matters. The Black Death was not only a story of death, it was a story of human fear, weakness, cruelty, courage, survival, and change. It showed that civilization can be shaken by something too small to see, and it left behind one of history's darkest lessons. Sometimes the world does not end with war. Sometimes it ends with a breath.